tonight we continue our conversation on the assessment of the Buhari government in the past 5 years. And the Minister of Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, rejoins us tonight and we'll talk mainly on housing. And the People's Democratic Party, PDP, screens aspirants jostling for the party's ticket ahead of the Edo governorship race. The APC also rules out guidelines ahead of his election. Hello everyone and welcome to the program. This is Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Wakimbaloye in Lagos, where President Muhammadu Buhari and today has attended a Friday prayer at the Aso Rock Villa after the reopening of worship centers. The prayers was held at the Villa Mosque since the restriction of It is the first time prayers have been held in the mosque since the restrictions imposed due to the coronavirus pandemic about 12 weeks ago. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 had issued new guidelines on religious activities. Only close aides of the President and other officers in the villa on grade level 14 and above participated in the prayers after they were thoroughly screened and had to each wear a mask as well as sanitize their hands as safety measures. Social distancing was also strictly observed in line with guidelines on public gathering. So, the five-man screening committee, inaugurated by the National Working Committee of the People's Democratic Party, has commenced the screening of aspirants for the upcoming 2020 governorship election in Edo State. The screening, which was held behind closed door, had Gideon Ikine and Ubeide Hiama were screened physically as one of the some of the aspirants, while Kenneth Maswagban was screened virtually. With six on the APC side, 6 governorship aspirants will test their popularity in the primary election of the All Progressives Congress on June the 22nd to determine who will bear the party's flag in the forthcoming governorship election in the state. The aspirants, as announced by the party, are Osage Ize-Iyamu, the incumbent governor, Godwin Obaseki, Dr. Pius Odubu, a former Chris Ogenwanyi, Osaro Obaze, and Matthew Idrokirewen. Ahead of the primary, the aspirants are to be screened on June the 10th and 11th. To ensure transparency in the exercise, the party says it will display documents submitted by the aspirants at the National Secretariat in Abuja and in Benin City, the Edo State capital, on June the 8th and 9th, 2020. There you have it. Some of the aspirants jostling for the tickets of the two parties. PDP on one hand, APC on the other hand. So we continue our conversation on the assessment of the 5 years of President Muhammadu Buhari in office and the first year of his second term. How has he fared as the president of Nigeria, considering the promises that were made to Nigerians in 2015 before the elections and, of course, before the 2019 elections? Those were campaign promises, but indeed, how much of those were really, of those promises have really been followed? Tonight, we continue our conversation with the Minister for Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, but let's remind you of some of the promises that were made at a time tonight on housing. So take a look at some of what was said during the campaign. The APC promised that they will amend the Constitution and the Land Use Act to create freehold, leasehold interests in land, along with matching grants for states to create a nationwide electronic land title register on a state-by-state basis, to create an additional middle class of at least 4 million new home owners by 2019, and also create a mortgage market by reforming land ownership to give ordinary Nigerians easy access to title deeds. These are some of the promises made in regards to housing. Let's get the conversation started, everyone, shall we? Joining us tonight, again, is the Minister of Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, is also a former governor of Lagos State. Indeed, it's good to see you again, Minister, Honorable Minister, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Perhaps some of quick questions around works and some roads issues before we jump back into the issue of housing. You mentioned that past administrations have based their performance in delivering the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway based on, it became more of sloganeering. That's exactly the word you used yesterday. We'd like to know, is this government looking into the books of how much was spent, the monies that were spent in the past administration? Is this government probing into those fundings and those spendings?
Good evening, Shehu, and good evening, Nigerians. And government is a very large organization. Government is not just the executive arm. Government is also the parliamentary legislative arm and also the judicial arm. And there are very, very wide powers in the Constitution for legislative oversight if any monies were appropriated and were not spent. But I think that I would like to start tonight's conversation with you, Shehu, where about June 12 last year and the commitment that the president made, saying that we can take 100 million people out of poverty in a decade. I think I want to start there. And I think it's important first to understand that when we are measuring what is happening in Nigeria, it is not an accurate picture, whether you are talking about housing or whatever, to see only what the federal government does. The federal government is not the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It is the sum total of 36 states. It is also the sum total when you are looking at the economy, what is happening in the private and public sector. So when we make these promises, we make them in the context of what government will do to lead the way, to enable the way, and to make it easy for private sector. So some of the things the president has done, for example, through the federal government is ease of doing business and all of that, because we know that really the driving power of the economy lies with the private sector, and particularly the MSMEs, which form the largest sector in any economy in the world. So what does 100 million people out of poverty mean? For those who have not contextualized it, it doesn't mean the federal government will employ 100 million people. It doesn't mean that the private sector on its own will employ 100 million people. It is a journey of prosperity. So let me tell you how infrastructure, roads, and housing does that. So when you award a road contract, what you see is the final road or a housing contract. But the journey starts from somewhere in the remotest parts of Nigeria where laterite sand are mined. In case you do not know, and I think it's important for Nigerians to know, from that time, the man who owns the land from whom they want to mine laterite is already beginning to make money. He has started his own journey to prosperity. Now, every truck that leaves his land gets about 10 to 16,000 naira per truck to take out sand. And these are parts of the informal economy that is not recorded. Now, the truck is then driven to the construction site. So, in a place that you know, for example, which is the Apapa-Ogunshoki Expressway, when I visited in December, we had come halfway and 5,000 trucks of laterite had moved. So you do the math, 10,000 times 5,000 to 1 or 2 or 3 landowners. Each driver there gets about 5,000 naira per day per truck. So this is how that economy works. Now, on places where we have started building roads, Lagos, Ibadan, Enugu, Port Harcourt, where the rail is going, Lagos, Kanu, go and look at the land values. The land values are already appreciating. So those whose land was worth 100 naira per hectare last week, it has now been worth twice or thrice more of that. So this is how prosperity is shared. This is the road to that 100 million people. So I think I want to start there. Now, going to housing in some detail, you cannot get the full picture of Nigeria's housing prosperity if you look at only what the federal government has done. So you will see it when you look at what the federal government
to Button. Sorry, Honorable Minister, yes, before you go into that, though I asked a question about the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, but since you mentioned on how wealth is being created and how Nigerians can benefit in some of the projects that the federal government or the government is doing generally, but how do you measure, does the government have a means by measuring just how much you have created with some of this construction and some of these projects that you are doing?
There's the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, and our officers also take data. So you cannot pass a memo through the Federal Executive Council today if you do not state the number of jobs that is supposed to create. So when I did my performance report a few months ago, and I think it was widely reported, we indicated the number of people we have employed on our housing and on our road projects. And each ministry is doing the same. So the Ministry of Labor is capturing it. There is unemployment issues in Nigeria as there are in other parts of the world. That doesn't mean government is not creating work. It just simply is the truth that many more people are hitting the job market than the economy is able to respond to. But that is an ongoing conversation. But if you permit me to now use this very limited time very seriously about housing, it's just to say, first of all, that what we have today is
Honourable Minister, again, permit me to butt in. So can you tell us in empirical terms, when you made that presentation to the President and to Cabinet, how many jobs did you foresee or project that your ministry created?
Shehu, there is a Bureau of Statistics, and please do not forget, I'm a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I don't think that you will be asking any minister anywhere to start giving you the accurate number. I have some data for you, but if you want the specific data of jobs, I don't have them here. I'm dealing with you from home. So I just want to share with you and Nigerians what has been done that I have data of. And this is a continuing process. But just to tell you and Nigerians that we are approaching housing from a broad spectrum of this thing, such that we are building houses directly through the ministry in 34 states. We have finished the first phase of that. We have started the second phase of that, and that is employing hundreds of people. And there are footages of people working on those sites when I went on tour. Your organization also has footage of that. Apart from that, the Federal Mortgage Bank is also intervening in housing development by funding estate development. I can tell you that the Federal Mortgage Bank is currently funding over 5,000 houses for development across the country. It has granted, I believe, over 5,301 mortgages worth over 38 billion naira. It has also granted, it might interest you, housing refurbishment, home refurbishment loans to 42,000 plus people, valued at about 34 billion. Now, the FHA is also building across the country. In addition to that, we have what we call site and service schemes, because not everybody wants to buy fully built government property, but they want government land and they want to build their own. That is going on in states like Edo, Ogun, Imo, Abia, and a couple of other states where we are granting land, we are providing the infrastructure and letting people carry on with their lives. In addition to that, we are also intervening in housing in documentation, issuing certificates of occupancy, because the house is not really worth the value unless you get certificate of occupancy. I have personally signed 3,450 certificates of occupancy in the last 2 years, and more are coming in. We are also intervening in granting consent to land transactions because the acquisition is not complete if you do not have consent. I think I've done over almost 2,000 consents in the last, but that is only what is happening in the federal government. Mind you, this is also happening in 36 states across the country and in the FCT, whether you are in the umbrella party or in the broom party. This is the sum total of our housing journey. And it is important to always keep that in perspective, because when those electoral promises were made, they were not made to say this will only happen in the federal government. It will happen in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And this does not now include what is going on. There are so many. Interestingly, your station carries a lot of adverts. Private sector, developing homes. We are the ones who have made that enabling environment possible. People are also buying from the private sector. That is the economy we are talking about here.
Honourable Minister, let's take a breather. But since we're talking about the promises of the government of Buhari in the last 5 years, we will ask the minister a few of the promises and what has been done in that regard. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Don't forget, our conversation tonight has been with the Minister of Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola. But let's remind you that Channels Television is keeping tabs on the elections that are coming in a few months, but the parties are preparing for the primaries and aspirants are jostling for the ticket. So you can see again, there you have it, the PDP aspirants on the left and the APC aspirants on your right. If you look at it, the PDP aspirant, Gideon Ikine, Ogbeide Ihama, Kenneth Imaswagwan, those are the ones that have been screened today. And for the APC, the governor, Godwin Obaseki, Osage Izeyamo, Pius Odubu, Chris Ogewonyi, Osaro Obaze, Matthew Idorokirienwe. Those are some of those who are jostling for the tickets of the parties. Let's get back to the conversation with the Minister of Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola. Thank you again, Honorable Minister, for your time tonight. So, looking at what the party said, your party, the APC, before the 2015 elections, the promise that was made was that at least 4 million new home owners will be created by 2019. Is that what subsists right now?
Okay, Sheon, I think the first thing I'd like to say is that you have a manifesto to hold us to. And that tells you how seriously, as a party, we take governance. So if you take your mind back to before 2015, what could you hold the other party to? There was no visible manifesto. They kept moving from needs to seeds, to Vision 2010, to transformation agenda, to 7-point agenda. This is a party and a government that is clear in its message. Our message is simple. It is clear, easy to understand. And that is the first thing to say for my party and our government. The next thing to say, as I've told you, we're rolling out houses. We're doing it as government. We're doing it through parastatals. Private sector is also participating. And when we told you we were going to do so many things, we didn't tell you it was going to be limited to only our party members. It was going to traverse the entire nation. Regrettably, I don't have the figure of number of new houses that have been built since that time, but I'm sure the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics will have those figures. But moving on, we know that the problem is large and the solutions are not yet as large. And that is why we have rolled out now a national cooperative housing scheme. What is this about? We want many more people to take control of their destiny, with government using its fiscal and monetary policy muscle to enable them using cooperatives, whether it's nurses cooperatives, transporters cooperatives, lawyers cooperatives, doctors cooperatives, artisans cooperatives. Register yourself, go to your state government, collect land. With that land, design what you want to build, go to your state governor, get planning permits so that nobody will come and demolish it in future and say it is a slum. Once you have all of that, go to any of the 36 state locations of the Federal Mortgage Bank and apply for a cooperative loan. We will do our best to support you. I am sure that as I finish tonight, by I believe 7:30, you will have the weekly cooperative housing Federal Mortgage Bank program on your show, because the program I watch monitoring what the bank is doing and whether their policies are concerned with the policies we're asking them to implement. So that is another effort to expand access to housing, access to credit, and so on and so forth. As I've said before, it is unfortunate that not everybody will probably own a house at the time you expect. Some may still have to rent. The obligation our government owes is to continue to do the best that we can to get people onto the ladder of prosperity. And the housing sector is doing that in many leaps and bounds. I will tell you the story of people I met on our housing sites, people who, because we are undertaking this project, they can earn a living. Their dignity is restored. So I met somebody who owns a cement mixer. He had been idle for 2 years before we came. He was earning 25,000 a day with his cement mixer. I met people selling food, husband and wife. The husband is a mason. The wife is the food vendor. The wife makes 5,000 naira a day. if you multiply that by 6, it is about 120,000 naira a month. That is 4 times the minimum wage. That is people moving from low, hopefully, to medium class as we go on. There are also daily paid artisans, welders, masons, who earn between 3 to 4, 5 a day. And if you look at that, that is a lot more than the national minimum wage calculated a month. And this goes into millions of naira a year. This is what the president's commitment to infrastructure and his commitment to move millions of Nigerians out of poverty mean. But he will not do it alone in the federal government. States have a role to play, and they are playing their role, and that is how to measure the economy. But even what government does is only a small aspect of the totality of this economy. And you must read what the private sector is enabled to do by our policies and our programs into the totality of your assessment of our government. And if you do that, you will see that we have done a commendable job from the mess that we inherited.
Honorable Minister, affordable housing on one hand. I remember that you disagree with me at some point on the figures of housing deficit. But tonight, let us ask you, before you came into office, there are figures that have come up on the number of housing deficit. Maybe you can tell us tonight, just what is the figure of the housing deficit in Nigeria? Honorable Minister.
I must thank you for asking me this question. So if I may respond.
Please go ahead.
If I may respond. Now, the last time Nigeria had a census was 2006. The obligation to hold a census is clearly ours, that of the federal government, and we haven't yet held one. So the question I've always asked people is, where did you get this figure of 17 million? Some have told me it is the World Bank. I have asked the World Bank, and the World Bank has disowned that figure as coming from them. So if anybody from the World Bank is listening and disputes it, let that person please step out. My understanding of the housing problem is that it is largely, an emphasis on the word largely, the housing problem is largely an urban problem. People migrating to cities. This is the problem of today's civilization across the world. Cities are getting bigger. But if you go to the suburban and rural areas, there are people who live in cities who have empty houses locked up in their homes, in their country homes. So is that part of the housing shortage, where you have houses that are empty? In almost every city of Nigeria that I have been to, there is one empty house or the other, in Abuja, in Lagos. So does that number that somebody threw out in the open and all of us are running after, does it include all of the empty houses? Because your deficit is not accurate if you do not factor in what you have and is unused. So I hope, and I have sent to the National Population Commission very detailed questions about home ownership, which I am optimistic that when the next census is conducted, we will be able to accurately dimension how large our deficit is. The truth is that if we misdiagnose how bad the problem is, our solution and treatment to it will be wrong. If a doctor misdiagnoses you, he will give you the wrong prescription.
All right.
I do not think that there is a deficit that large across Nigeria. There's a deficit in the urban centers. But even within that deficit, we must find out how many houses are unused and are empty. My ministry is conducting a survey of those type of situations across the 2 most populous states, across the 6 geopolitical zones of the country, to give us an idea. Because also, if I may make this point to clarify that point, if you look at the cities, the place where you have traffic problem is also in the urban centers. The place where you have heavy waste management problem is also in the urban centers. And that's why I say it is my belief that the housing shortages are largely an urban problem. There's no go slow in the village. So I think that should make the point I'm making perhaps clearer to Nigerians who are listening to us, so that we do not keep scaring ourselves with unverified, untested, and unproven figures. While we want to determine what those figures are, we are ramping up many solutions by government, working with private sector, enabling private sector, including the cooperative housing scheme that I've spoken to you about, to create traction and to create opportunities for a lot of people to get onto the housing ladder.
Well, my sincere thanks to you again, Honorable Minister for Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, for your time tonight and explaining some of these issues vis-a-vis the promises of your party and the government of President Muhammadu Buhari in the last 5 years. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And that's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Kimbaloye. Bye-bye.